The sun had just begun to rise over the jagged horizon of Calyx 7, a distant planet far from Earth. Its sky was a strange shade of pale green, and the wind carried the faint smell of minerals from the rocky soil. In this harsh world, few dared to settle, and even fewer survived. Yet, in a small valley surrounded by cliffs, a modest human settlement had taken root. At the edge of the settlement, a lone figure stood by a wooden doorway, cradling a tiny bundle in his arms. Captain Elias Vorn was tall, his shoulders broad from years of labor and training, yet his eyes carried a fatigue that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. In his arms lay his daughter, Lyra, barely 6 months old, her tiny fingers curling around his thumb as she stirred in her sleep. Elias had lost his wife 2 years ago during the initial colonization mission, and since then, the responsibility of running the settlement and raising Lyra had fallen entirely on him. He had never imagined life would become so lonely, so difficult. The settlers respected him for his leadership, but respect could not feed a baby or soothe a crying child at 3 in the morning. Today, though, there was a glimmer of hope. A small figure approached down the uneven path leading to his home. She moved with quiet confidence, her steps steady, despite the rough terrain. Mara was her name, a woman the villagers often overlooked. She was round-faced, with soft features and a warm smile that never seemed to leave her lips. Many of the settlers whispered behind her back, calling her Plump or slow. But Mara had a strength they did not see. She understood life in its simplest and most vital forms. She stopped in front of Elias, holding a basket covered with a cloth. "Captain Vorn," she said softly, bowing her head in respect. "I hear you have need of help. I can care for the baby, if you will allow me." Elias studied her for a long moment. He could see the kindness in her eyes, the quiet determination. Around them, other settlers paused their work, watching the meeting with curiosity and judgment. No one had offered to help him since his wife had passed. Many had avoided the child, saying a plump woman could not be trusted with a baby. "No one desires a plump girl, sir," Mara said, her voice steady despite the whispers. "But I can care for the baby." Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest. He knelt down, lifting Lyra so she could see Mara. The baby's small eyes blinked. Curious and trusting, Mara smiled and reached out gently, allowing Lyra to grasp her finger. "Then you shall stay," Elias replied. His voice carried authority, but beneath it was gratitude he could not hide. The murmurs of the settlers grew quieter, some nodding reluctantly. From that moment, Mara became a fixture in Elias's home. She was not just a caretaker. She was a lifeline. Her days began before dawn, preparing simple meals with whatever ingredients the settlement could gather. She cleaned and organized the small home, mended clothes, and most importantly, tended to Lyra with patience and love. At first, Elias watched her work with a mixture of suspicion and awe. Mara moved with purpose, her hands skillful and sure. She sang soft songs to Lyra, teaching her sounds and rhythms, while Elias went about the hard labor of maintaining the settlement. Over time, he began to rely on her advice. She understood how to stretch rations, how to preserve food, and even how to make herbal remedies for minor illnesses. One evening, as the twin moons of Calyx 7 rose over the cliffs, Elias found Mara sitting by the fire, feeding Lyra a warm, mashed meal of alien roots and grains. "You are remarkable," he said quietly, almost to himself. Mara glanced at him, her smile gentle. "I only do what I must. The baby needs care, and this settlement needs people who care for each other." Her words settled over Elias like a comforting blanket. In a world that seemed to punish weakness, Mara's courage and compassion felt revolutionary. The colony, however, was not free from challenges. Rumors of alien patrols had reached their ears, and tension was a constant companion. The Zytrax, a species from a nearby star system, had been hostile to human settlements in the past. They were powerful, technologically advanced, and unpredictable. Elias had spent long nights planning defenses, building walls, and training settlers. But no amount of preparation could replace the calm assurance Mara brought to his home. One morning, a harsh wind swept through the valley, carrying fine dust that stung the skin. Mara was already outside, tending to the small garden of hardy plants that provided their food. Lyra sat in a woven sling on her back, observing the plants with wide, curious eyes. Elias joined her, noting how calmly Mara worked, even in the biting wind. "You are fearless," he said. "Most would hide indoors in weather like this." Mara shook her head. "Fear does not feed anyone. Hunger is worse than fear, and neglect can kill a child faster than any storm." She paused, adjusting Lyra's sling. "You do what you can, Captain. I will do the rest." Elias felt a surge of admiration. He had faced storms, attacks, and isolation. But Mara's courage was different. It was quiet, steady, and unyielding. She was a reminder that humanity could survive not through strength alone, but through care, ingenuity, and courage. As the day passed, settlers began to notice the changes. The baby smiled more, laughed more, and cried less. Mara's meals were nourishing, inventive, and surprisingly delicious given the limited ingredients. Slowly, the whispers of judgment began to fade, replaced by grudging respect. Some settlers even began to ask for her guidance, seeking advice on rationing food or tending to small injuries. Elias watched all of this with a quiet pride. He knew that Mara's presence had done more than care for his daughter, it had begun to heal the community. He thought of his late wife, and wondered how she would have felt seeing this woman, once overlooked, now essential to their survival. That night, the settlement gathered for a small meal by the communal fire. Mara served the food with a warm smile. Lyra, sitting in her lap, clapping tiny hands in delight. The settlers shared stories, laughter echoing under the alien moons. Elias stood nearby, feeling a rare sense of peace. For the first time in years, he felt that survival was not merely a struggle. It was a shared effort, a triumph of humanity over adversity. As the fire crackled and the stars sparkled overhead, Elias realized something profound. In this distant, harsh world, what mattered most was not appearances, titles, or strength. It was care, compassion, and the courage to stand by each other. Mara had shown him that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or firepower, but love and ingenuity. And so, in the quiet valley of Calyx 7, a widower, his daughter, and a plump, brave cook began a new chapter not just for themselves, but for the entire colony. Together, they would face whatever the universe sent, knowing that as long as they had each other, humanity could endure anything. The valley of Calyx 7 was calm in the early morning, yet a tension hung in the air, invisible but palpable. Elias Vorn moved among the settlers, checking the perimeter and inspecting the rudimentary defenses they had built. Each wall, each watchtower, each pit trap was a reminder that the universe outside their small valley was not kind. The alien species known as the Zytrax had been seen near other human colonies, striking quickly, with precision, and leaving destruction in their wake. Elias tightened his coat against the cold wind and squinted toward the distant cliffs. "We must be ready," he muttered to himself. The settlers had begun to murmur quietly about the possibility of attack, and he knew fear could spread faster than any storm on this harsh planet. Inside his small home, Mara was already busy. She moved efficiently, preparing a breakfast that was both nourishing and filling. She mashed alien tubers into a soft paste, seasoned with herbs that grew only in the valley's rocky soil. Lyra sat in her lap, reaching for the food and giggling with delight. "You know," Mara said softly, as she fed the baby, "the Zytrax might think humans are weak, but weakness can be dangerous if it is misunderstood." Elias appeared at the doorway, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I hope they misunderstand us," he said, though his voice carried worry. Mara looked up at him, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Humans have survived on Earth through far worse," she said. "We can survive here too." That afternoon, a low hum traveled through the valley. Settlers paused their work and turned their eyes to the sky. High above, strange, metallic shapes shimmered in the greenish atmosphere. The Zytrax scouts had arrived. Elias raised his hand, signaling the settlers to remain calm. "They are observing us," he said. "Do not make sudden movements." Mara held Lyra closer, whispering comforting words to the baby. Even the youngest settlers felt a ripple of fear. Yet Mara's calmness had a ripple effect. And slowly, the settlement returned to its routines, though eyes remained wary. As the day passed, the scouts circled the valley, their bright, metallic bodies catching the light. They were unlike anything the humans had seen before. Sleek, powerful, and intelligent. They watched the settlement with what seemed like curiosity, though Elias knew better. The Zytrax were predators in the galaxy, always testing, always hunting for advantage. "Captain," a young settler named Yoren said, approaching cautiously. "What do we do if they attack?" Elias rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We survive. We make them think we are stronger than we are. Every trap, every wall, every idea counts." Mara stepped forward, her eyes glinting with determination. "Then let us prepare," she said. She moved to organize the settlers, not as a commander but as someone who understood people's strengths. "Some of you can gather more resources, others will reinforce the walls. Everyone must contribute, no matter how small the task seems." Her voice carried authority, and the settlers obeyed, motivated not by fear, but by respect for her competence. Mara had a way of making each person feel needed. And in this harsh world, that feeling could mean the difference between despair and hope. As the evening approached, Mara and Elias worked together to fortify the settlement. Mara's skills extended beyond cooking. She could turn ordinary objects into ingenious tools. She took scraps of metal, broken pipes, and old containers, and fashioned them into barriers and traps. Elias watched in amazement as she explained the designs with simple clarity. "See here," she said, pointing to a small pit trap covered with loose rocks. "The Zytrax will step on it without noticing. The rocks will give way, slowing them down, buying us time." Elias nodded, impressed. "You think like a tactician," he said. "I think like a survivor," Mara replied. "Sometimes that is enough." That night, as the settlement gathered around the fire, Elias spoke quietly to Mara. "You've changed everything here," he said. "Even the settlers who doubted you now follow your advice without question." Mara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We all need someone to guide us when we are afraid. And sometimes, courage is contagious." The night passed uneventfully, but Elias knew it was only the calm before the storm. The Zytrax were patient. They would not attack recklessly. They would wait, observe, and strike when humans least expected it. The next morning, a strange sound echoed across the valley, a low, resonating pulse that vibrated through the rocks. The Zytrax had deployed a scanning device, moving carefully toward the settlement. The humans watched, tense but ready. Mara took Lyra into her arms and moved to the edge of the settlement, inspecting the device. "It's observing, yes," she said. "But it can also be tricked." Elias frowned. "How?" "By making them see what we want them to see," Mara replied. She organized the settlers into small groups, each responsible for creating false signals of activity. Lights flickered in empty huts, shadows moved where no one actually stood, and small noisemakers mimicked human voices in areas where no one was present. The Zytrax scanners paused, analyzed, and eventually moved on, failing to find weaknesses. Elias watched the operation with growing respect. Mara's ingenuity had turned fear into strategy. Over the next few days, the settlers worked tirelessly under Mara's guidance. She taught them to adapt, to create, and to use their surroundings as tools. Rocks became barriers. Plants became camouflage. And the settlement began to feel stronger, more alive, and more human. Lyra thrived under Mara's care. She laughed, played, and learned, absorbing every sound and gesture. Her presence reminded the settlers why they were fighting to survive. Mara often told Elias, The child is the future. Protecting her protects us all. Then, one morning, the sky darkened unexpectedly. A storm, unlike any before, swept through the valley, carrying acidic rain that hissed against metal and stone. The settlers rushed to shelters, guided by Mara and Elias. The storm was violent, battering walls and roofs, but it revealed the strength of their preparations. The traps and barriers Mara had designed held firm, and the settlers moved with coordination that only practice and trust could bring. After the storm passed, the valley was battered but intact. The settlers cheered quietly, their relief mingled with awe. Mara, standing in the center of the settlement, looked at the damage with calm eyes. "We survived," she said, "and we will survive again, because we care for each other, and we are willing to adapt." Elias felt pride swelling in his chest. This woman, once overlooked, had become the heart of the settlement. Her courage, intelligence, and compassion had transformed fear into hope. That evening, the twin moons rose over the cliffs, casting a pale light across the valley. Elias stood with Mara and Lyra, watching the stars twinkle in the alien sky. "Do you think the Zytrax will attack soon?" he asked. Mara held Lyra close, her eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps. But we are ready. And even if they do, we will not face them as frightened humans. We will face them as humans who care, humans who adapt, humans who survive." Elias nodded, realizing that the lesson Mara had brought to the settlement was larger than survival. It was about the essence of humanity itself, the courage to protect, the ingenuity to overcome, and the resilience to thrive, even in the harshest conditions. And so, the Valley of Calyx 7 settled into a fragile rhythm. Each day a test of skill, bravery, and unity. The Zytrax continued to observe from afar, but the humans of the settlement were no longer the same people they had been before. They were clever, resourceful, and fiercely protective of each other. Mara had not only cared for the baby, she had awakened a spirit in the settlement that would endure challenges far beyond storms and alien scouts. The settlers began to believe not only in survival but in victory, in the strength of the human heart, and in the unyielding will to thrive. No matter the universe's cruelty, as the night grew still, Elias placed a hand on Mara's shoulder. "You've done more than care for my daughter," he said softly. "You've reminded us all what it means to be human." Mara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lyra's face. "Humanity is never just about strength, or speed, or power," she said. "It's about heart, ingenuity, and the courage to care when others turn away. And that is something even the Zytrax cannot understand." The baby giggled. The settlers slept in secure shelters, and the valley, battered but alive, waited for the next challenge. But now, for the first time, they faced the future not with fear, but with confidence, because they had each other, and they had Mara. The sun rose slowly over the Valley of Calyx 7, casting a muted green light over the settlement. Despite the alien moons and strange sky, life continued. The settlers were beginning to feel a fragile sense of security. Walls were stronger, traps were more cunning, and morale had improved. Yet Elias Vorn knew that security was always temporary. The Zytrax were patient and intelligent. Their attacks came not from recklessness, but from calculated precision. Mara had begun to notice subtle changes in the environment. The plants in the valley were wilting faster, and the water from the small stream had grown slightly bitter. She examined the soil, tasting a small root herself to check its quality. Her brow furrowed. "We are running low on some essential nutrients," she told Elias. "If the settlers do not get enough food soon, they will grow weak, and the baby could fall ill." Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we must find a solution. We cannot let this valley defeat us." Mara's mind worked quickly. She began instructing the settlers to forage further into the cliffs, to gather plants that most people avoided because of their strange taste or unfamiliar appearance. She showed them how to combine different roots and herbs to make meals both nourishing and safe. The settlers followed her guidance, some hesitant, others trusting her entirely. Even the most skeptical began to recognize that her knowledge was invaluable. Days passed, and life became routine once more. Lyra played near the garden, her laughter brightening the settlement. Mara watched her closely, ensuring she had enough to eat, enough water, and enough warmth. Yet despite their efforts, the baby began to cough softly one morning. Elias noticed it immediately and grew worried. "She's burning up," he said, lifting her in his arms. "She needs medicine." Mara examined Lyra carefully, listening to her breathing. "It is a minor infection," she said, though her eyes were grave. "But if we do not act quickly, it could worsen. The settlers are also showing signs of fatigue and malnutrition. We must create something stronger. An herbal remedy that can boost their immunity." Elias felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had faced storms, alien scouts, and sabotage before, but the thought of failing his daughter was unbearable. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Gather the rare herbs from the cliffside," Mara said without hesitation. "I will prepare the remedy here, but you must protect the foragers. The Zytrax scouts may still be near." Elias nodded and quickly assembled a small group of able-bodied settlers to accompany him. Mara stayed behind, her hands moving deftly over the boiling pots and grinding stones. She hummed a soft tune, a melody she had created for Lyra, while combining ingredients into a paste that would be safe for the baby and the other settlers. The journey to the cliffs was perilous. The wind howled, carrying acidic dust that stung their skin. The settlers moved carefully, scanning the horizon for any sign of the alien scouts. The Zytrax had not returned openly, but their presence was felt in the stillness and the strange shadows that seemed to move without reason. Elias led the group, his eyes sharp. "Keep close," he warned. "Watch each other's backs. Mara is counting on us." Hours passed as they collected the herbs, their baskets growing heavier with each carefully chosen plant. The sun began to set, painting the cliffs in deep emerald and bronze shades. Just as they were about to return, a sudden screech echoed across the valley. Shadows moved unnaturally fast, and the Zytrax scouts appeared, descending from the cliffs like predators. "Run!" Elias shouted. The settlers scrambled, trying to hold on to their baskets while dodging the agile attackers. Elias fought with controlled strength, pushing one scout away from a young settler. Even in fear, he remained calm, his mind focused on protecting the group. Back at the settlement, Mara noticed the disturbance. She gripped Lyra tightly, her eyes narrowing as she heard the commotion outside. She knew the settlers would be in danger, but she also knew that the remedy she was preparing could not wait. She worked faster, combining the herbs with boiling water and grinding them into a paste. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she moved with a precision born of desperation. Hours later, the group returned, battered and exhausted but alive. The settlers immediately gathered around Mara as she distributed the freshly prepared remedy. Lyra drank carefully, her cough easing almost immediately. The settlers followed, their strength slowly returning. Elias watched Mara, awe growing in his chest. "You've done it," he said softly. "You saved them all." Mara shook her head. "We all did it. But some sacrifices are necessary." She glanced toward the horizon, where the Zytrax scouts had retreated, but not vanished. "They are watching, always. We must continue to prepare." Over the next few days, the settlement grew stronger. Mara trained the settlers not only in foraging and cooking but also in simple defensive techniques. They learned to move quietly, to build barriers that could slow an attacker, and to work as a team. Mara emphasized cooperation and observation, turning ordinary settlers into clever defenders. Lyra thrived under Mara's care, her laughter echoing through the settlement. Elias found himself smiling more often, reassured that his daughter was safe. Yet he also realized that the valley was far from safe, and the Zytrax could return at any moment. One night, as the settlers slept, Mara and Elias sat by the fire. The twins, moons of Calyx 7, reflected off the cliffs, casting long shadows. Elias took a deep breath. Mara, I do not know how to thank you. You've done more than care for my daughter. You've given everyone hope. Mara smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Hope is something we create ourselves, she said. It is not a gift to be given, but a choice to be made every day. We choose to survive, and in that choice, we find strength. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. The Zytrax had returned, and this time they moved with purpose. Elias and Mara quickly gathered the settlers, moving them into safe positions behind the traps and barriers that had been carefully constructed. The alien attackers moved silently, testing the defenses with precision. Yet the humans were ready. Mara directed the settlers calmly, her voice steady even as the battle began. Rocks fell from concealed pits. Simple mechanical devices slowed the Zytrax, and traps cleverly disguised with vegetation caused confusion among the attackers. Elias marveled at Mara's strategy. She's turning their strength against them, he thought. It's remarkable. Despite the humans' ingenuity, the battle was not without cost. One young settler was injured, and several traps were damaged. Yet each time the Zytrax tried to advance, Mara and the settlers adapted, using quick thinking and resourcefulness to hold them off. Finally, as the first light of dawn touched the valley, the Zytrax retreated. The humans were exhausted but victorious. They had survived another attack, not through brute strength, but through intelligence, courage, and cooperation. Elias knelt beside Lyra, who was still wrapped safely in Mara's arms. He realized that the true power of humanity was not weapons or technology, but the will to protect, the ability to adapt, and the courage to care for each other. Mara had reminded him of that lesson repeatedly, and now, more than ever, he understood its depth. The valley was quiet once more. The settlers began repairing the damage, tending to the injured, and reinforcing their defenses. Mara moved among them, offering guidance, comfort, and encouragement. She had saved the baby, strengthened the settlers, and proven that humanity's greatest strength lay in its resilience and ingenuity. That night, as Elias looked over the sleeping settlement, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Mara had sacrificed much time, energy, comfort, but she had done it willingly, driven by compassion and courage. The settlers, inspired by her example, were beginning to see that survival was not about who was strongest or fastest, but about who cared enough to act when it mattered most. Lyra stirred in her sleep, smiling in her dreams. Elias gently brushed a hand over her hair and whispered, "We are safe, little one." Thanks to her, Mara, standing nearby, heard him and smiled softly. "We all protect each other," she said. "That is the way of humans. That is the way we survive." In the quiet valley of Calyx 7, under the watchful alien moons, a small community of humans had grown stronger. They had faced sickness, environmental hazards, and alien threats. Yet they endured, and at the heart of it all was a woman who had been underestimated, a baby who reminded them of hope, and a widower who had learned that the courage to care was more powerful than any weapon. The Zytrax would return someday, Elias knew. But next time, the humans would be ready, not only with traps and walls, but with ingenuity, bravery, and the unyielding spirit that Mara had awakened in them all. Humanity had survived again, and with each challenge, they would only grow stronger. The sun rose on the valley of Calyx 7 with a strange, eerie glow. The winds carried the scent of minerals and the faint tang of alien dust, as though warning the settlers that something was coming. For weeks, the Zytrax had observed from a distance, probing, testing, and calculating. Now, their patience had ended. Captain Elias Vorn stood at the edge of the settlement, scanning the cliffs and horizon. His eyes, sharp and vigilant, caught every movement, every shimmer of light. The settlers were busy reinforcing barriers, checking traps, and practicing emergency drills. The tension was thick, but Mara moved among them, her calm presence steadying the nerves of everyone she met. "They will come today," Elias said, his voice low. "We must be ready." Mara nodded, adjusting Lyra in the sling on her back. The baby gurgled happily, unaware of the danger looming outside. "Then let us remind them," Mara replied. By mid-morning, the first signs of the Zytrax appeared. Small metallic scouts descended from the cliffs, moving silently, scouting the settlement. Elias and Mara had prepared for this moment. Settlers were hidden behind walls, in trenches, and near clever traps that Mara had helped design. "Remember," Mara whispered to Elias, "we do not have their technology, but we have creativity. That is our weapon." The alien scouts advanced cautiously. They were fast, sleek, and intelligent, their movements almost mechanical. But the humans were ready. A simple pressure plate concealed under rocks triggered a series of falling barriers, forcing the scouts to slow down. Spiked traps emerged from the ground, carefully hidden among stones, and the settlers launched small nets to entangle the aliens' legs. The Zytrax adapted quickly. But Mara had anticipated this. She had trained the settlers to think ahead, to remain calm and adjust. Every action of the enemy was met with a countermeasure. Every movement predicted and exploited. Elias marveled at Mara's strategy. "She's turning their strengths against them," he thought. "They cannot anticipate human ingenuity." Lyra, in her sling, watched the chaos with wide, curious eyes. Mara hummed softly to her, keeping the baby calm. The settlers fought with intelligence and coordination rather than brute force. They lured the Zytrax into narrow passages where the aliens' speed was useless, and guided them into traps that Mara had prepared weeks ago. Hours passed, and the battle raged. Though the humans had no advanced weapons, their clever use of the environment leveled the field. Walls were reinforced at the right moment, pits were covered to mislead the attackers, and makeshift barriers forced the Zytrax into disadvantageous positions. Elias realized that this was more than just a defense, it was a demonstration of human adaptability. The aliens could not predict ingenuity, courage, and cooperation. Humans could improvise in ways that machines and programmed instincts could not. At a critical moment, a group of Zytrax scouts attempted to flank the settlement, hoping to breach the defenses from the cliffs. Mara noticed their movement immediately. She shouted instructions to a small group of settlers who had been hidden nearby. Using ropes, rocks, and clever pulley systems, they sent a cascade of stones and debris rolling down the cliffs, blocking the Zytrax advance. Elias was impressed. "Every trap she designed works perfectly," he thought. "We could not have survived without her." Meanwhile, Mara moved through the settlement, checking on each group, giving instructions, and encouraging the frightened settlers. Her calmness and confidence inspired them, turning fear into focused action. Even those who had doubted her earlier were now fully convinced of her value. The Zytrax began to retreat slightly, realizing that their initial assault had been anticipated. But they were relentless. Another wave approached, faster and more coordinated. The humans responded in kind. Mara had designed a system of signals using flags, sounds, and reflective surfaces to coordinate the settlers. Each trap and barrier was part of a larger plan, and the Zytrax could not keep up. Elias joined Mara in the center of the settlement, giving commands where needed. "The flanking units are approaching," he said. "We must hold the center until the barriers slow them down." Mara nodded. "We can do more than hold them. We can make them believe the valley is stronger than it is." She instructed a group of settlers to create decoys, mannequins made of cloth and rocks, placed strategically to mislead the aliens. Fires were lit in specific patterns to suggest more defenders than were actually present. The Zytrax hesitated, unsure which movements were real. The humans took advantage, launching coordinated attacks with rocks, nets, and clever mechanisms. One by one, the alien scouts fell back, confused and outmaneuvered. By late afternoon, the Zytrax had been driven from the immediate valley. The humans had survived without a single fatality. The settlers cheered quietly, relief and pride mixing in their voices. Lyra clapped her tiny hands, laughing, unaware of the victory that had just been won. Elias looked at Mara, his eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "You've done it again," he said softly. "You've led us through danger. And we are still here." Mara smiled, wiping sweat from her forehead. "We did it together," she replied. "Every person here played a role. Every small action mattered. That is the strength of humanity. Not one person, not one weapon, but all of us, united." The settlement began to repair damage, tending to minor injuries and reinforcing the walls for the next attack. Mara moved among them, offering guidance and encouragement. She had not only defended the settlement but had inspired everyone to see their own strength and potential. Elias realized that the Zytrax would return. They were intelligent, persistent, and adaptive. But now, the settlers were also stronger, smarter, and more coordinated. Mara had taught them to rely on ingenuity, creativity, and unity, the qualities that made humans unique. That night, as the settlers slept, Elias and Mara stood together on a cliff overlooking the valley. Lyra slept peacefully in her sling, wrapped in warmth and safety. The moons reflected off the cliffs, casting a silver glow. "Do you think they'll come back?" Elias asked, a trace of worry in his voice. "They may," Mara said softly. "But we are ready. And next time, they will see that humans are not so easily defeated. They may have technology, speed, and power, but we have something stronger. The courage to care, the ability to adapt, and the will to survive." Elias nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Mara had not only defended the settlement, she had transformed it. The humans were no longer passive settlers waiting for fate to decide. They were a community capable of thinking, acting, and overcoming challenges as one. The valley was quiet once more, but the night carried a sense of readiness and vigilance. The settlers were tired, but proud. They had faced an intelligent enemy and survived through wit, courage, and unity. They had learned that humanity's true power lay not in brute force but in creativity, compassion, and resilience. As Elias looked over the valley, he thought about the future. The Zytrax might return, and other dangers could appear. But now the settlement had a leader, a guide, and a symbol of hope in Mara. She had shown that even in a harsh world, humans could endure, adapt, and triumph. Lyra stirred in her sleep, reaching out to Mara. Mara smiled, brushing the baby's hair gently. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered. "Your family, this valley, and all of us, we will keep you safe. Always." Elias placed a hand on Mara's shoulder, feeling a quiet sense of gratitude and admiration. "You've changed everything here," he said. "Not just for me or Lyra, but for everyone. You've reminded us what it means to be human." Mara looked out at the valley, her eyes shining with quiet determination. "Being human is about more than survival," she said. "It's about caring, thinking, and acting together. That is something no alien can take away." 3. Thanks for watching. This 4. End quote. Under the twin moons, the settlers slept. The valley calm, but alive. The Zytrax had been defeated. For now, but the humans had learned a lesson stronger than any wall or weapon. Their ingenuity, unity, and courage were their greatest defenses. And at the heart of it all was a plump, brave woman, a baby, and a widower who had learned that the strength of humanity lies not in power alone, but in the will to care for each other. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, the humans of Calyx 7 were ready to meet it head-on. Together, they had faced the impossible and survived, and together, they would continue to thrive. The valley of Calyx 7 was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the twin moons. The air was calm, almost serene, yet the settlers knew better than to take the peace for granted. Danger still lingered beyond the cliffs, in the form of the Zytrax and other threats unknown. But the settlement had changed. It was no longer a fragile outpost of humans struggling to survive. It was a community of ingenuity, courage, and resilience. Captain Elias Vorn walked among the settlers, his eyes scanning the valley, proud of what they had accomplished. Every wall, every trap, every carefully planted garden spoke of human determination. But more than structures or strategies, what filled Elias with pride was the spirit of the people, their willingness to adapt, to care for one another, and to face challenges together. Mara moved beside him, Lyra asleep in her sling. The baby's presence was a constant reminder of why they fought, why they endured. Mara had become more than a caretaker. She was a leader, a symbol of human perseverance. She had shown that even in the harshest conditions, kindness, creativity, and courage could triumph. The morning air was filled with activity. Settlers were repairing the damage from the previous Zytrax attack, reinforcing walls, and tending to crops. Mara instructed a group of children in basic survival skills, showing them how to identify edible plants, avoid dangerous terrain, and work together to solve problems. Elias watched, heart swelling with admiration. The children were learning not just to survive, but to thrive just as Lyra would, under Mara's careful guidance. "Look at them," Elias said softly, nodding toward the children. "They will grow up strong, clever, and fearless." Mara smiled faintly. "They will grow up knowing that humanity is not measured by strength alone. It is measured by the courage to care, the creativity to adapt, and the willingness to face challenges together." The day passed with an unusual calm. Even the Zytrax had retreated, at least for now. Settlers moved with confidence, performing tasks with precision and cooperation. The lessons Mara had taught them were becoming second nature. Simple inventions, clever traps, and coordinated strategies were no longer a novelty. They were the foundation of their daily lives. As the sun began to set, Elias called a meeting of the settlers. They gathered around the central fire, the warm glow reflecting off determined faces. Elias spoke with quiet authority, recounting the events of the past weeks, the storms, the sickness, the alien scouts, and the full-scale attack. "You have all proven that humanity can survive against impossible odds," he said, "not because of weapons or technology, but because of courage, ingenuity, and unity. Each of you played a part, and each of you contributed to the survival of this settlement." Mara stepped forward, holding Lyra. "You have learned that survival is not just about defending yourself," she said. "It is about helping each other, thinking creatively, and never underestimating what humans can accomplish when we work together. That is our strength, and that is what makes us human." The settlers cheered softly, but the applause was more than celebration. It was recognition. Recognition of each other's efforts, recognition of their shared strength, and recognition that their lives were meaningful, not just in surviving, but in thriving together. As night fell, the valley glowed under the twin moons. Elias and Mara walked to the edge of the settlement, Lyra asleep in Mara's arms. The air was filled with the soft sounds of activity. Settlers tending fires, repairing walls, and talking quietly among themselves. The future was uncertain, yet there was hope. "Do you think they will return?" Elias asked, nodding toward the distant cliffs. "They may," Mara replied. "But we are ready. And if they come, they will find not weak humans, but a community united, clever, and fearless. We have learned, adapted, and grown stronger. That is something no alien can take away." Elias nodded, realizing the truth of her words. Humanity was not defined by the environment it faced, or by the enemies that threatened it. Humanity was defined by its response, the courage to act, the ingenuity to adapt, and the willingness to care for one another. Lyra stirred, opening her small eyes to look at Mara. She cooed softly, reaching for her fingers. Mara smiled, brushing a gentle hand over the baby's hair. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered. "You are safe because we care for you, and we will continue to care, no matter what comes." The settlers were beginning to prepare for long-term life in the valley. Mara organized workshops for practical skills: building, foraging, and basic engineering. She encouraged creative thinking, turning ordinary materials into clever solutions for daily problems. The valley became not only a settlement, but a school of human resilience. Elias watched as settlers worked together, inspired by Mara's guidance. Even the previously skeptical adults were now contributing ideas, building traps, or teaching skills to younger members. The settlement had transformed into a place of shared responsibility and shared pride. Days turned into weeks. The Zytrax did not return immediately, and the humans took the time to strengthen their community further. Mara's presence was central to their growth. Her intelligence, calm demeanor, and unwavering care for Lyra had inspired every settler. They learned not only to survive but to see potential in themselves and in each other. One morning, a scout reported strange activity beyond the cliff's possible Zytrax movement. Elias gathered the settlers and Mara. "This could be another attack," he said. Mara looked out at the horizon. "Perhaps. But if it is, we are ready. We have learned, adapted, and grown stronger. They may have advanced technology, but we have something stronger. Ingenuity, courage, and unity. That is humanity's greatest weapon." The settlers nodded, ready to face whatever came. Mara smiled faintly, holding Lyra, who babbled happily. The baby was a reminder of everything they fought to protect: life, hope, and the future. Weeks later, the Zytrax did return, but the humans were prepared. Traps, clever signals, and coordinated defenses forced the aliens to retreat quickly. The settlers, guided by Mara and Elias, had turned the valley into a fortress of human ingenuity. The Zytrax could not break it, and their attempts only reinforced the settlers' confidence. Elias realized that the battle was not just physical, it was symbolic. The humans had shown that no matter how advanced the enemy, the strength of humanity lay in creativity, resilience, and care. Mara had demonstrated that a single person's courage and ingenuity could inspire an entire community to greatness. As the days turned into months, the settlement of Calyx 7 thrived. Gardens flourished, the water supply was purified and stored efficiently, and the settlers worked in harmony. Mara taught the children, including Lyra, not only survival skills, but also the values of compassion, courage, and clever thinking. One evening, as the settlement gathered for a communal meal, Elias looked around at the smiling faces, at the laughter and chatter of a thriving community. He thought of the days when fear and doubt had dominated the valley, how far they had come, and how much of it was due to a woman many had once overlooked. "Thank you, Mara," he whispered softly. "You have changed everything here. Not just for Lyra and me, but for everyone." Mara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from the baby's face. "It was not just me. It was all of us. Humans thrive not because of one hero, but because we care for each other, adapt to challenges, and never give up." Elias nodded, understanding fully now. Mara's lesson had been more than survival, it was a reminder of what it truly meant to be human. Courage, ingenuity, and care could triumph over fear, over alien threats, and over harsh worlds. The valley was peaceful that night. Under the twin moons of Calyx 7, the settlers slept safely, confident in their skills, their unity, and the lessons they had learned. The Zytrax might return someday, but the humans were ready. They had proven that intelligence, courage, and compassion were stronger than any technological advantage. Lyra stirred in her sleep, a soft smile on her face. She was the embodiment of hope, the future of humanity in a distant world. Mara held her close, whispering promises of safety and care, while Elias watched them both, feeling an unshakable sense of pride and gratitude. The legacy of their struggle was clear. It was not just walls or traps, not just victories over aliens, it was the spirit of humanity itself, the ability to endure, to adapt, and to protect one another. In the valley of Calyx 7, far from Earth, a small community of humans had created a beacon of hope and resilience, and as the twin moons reflected off the cliffs, Elias knew that humanity's story would continue. No matter what challenges came, no matter what enemies appeared, the settlers of Calix 7 were ready, because they had courage, ingenuity, and, above all, the will to care. Mara smiled, holding Lyra close. "The future is safe," she whispered, "and it belongs to those who care." Under the alien moons, the settlement slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that humans could endure, adapt, and triumph. Humanity had faced the universe, and won not with weapons, but with heart.